Lieutenant Hyunwoo Kim was halfway through his evening patrol when the trouble started. The main corridor of Station Omega-7 buzzed with its usual mix of alien traders, human diplomats, and mechanical service drones floating overhead. The air smelled of recycled oxygen mixed with the metallic tang that all space stations seemed to carry. He noticed the Krillian gang first. Hard not to, really. The four aliens stood nearly 8 feet tall, their reptilian scales catching the harsh overhead, lighting like armor plating. Their leader, a massive brute with scars crisscrossing his face, wore the leather jacket typical of their kind, a human fashion they'd adopted and twisted into something intimidating. Chrome spikes jutted from the shoulders, and alien symbols were burned into the back. The gang was blocking the pathway near the food court, forcing smaller aliens to squeeze past them. A family of blue-skinned Altarians hurried by, keeping their children close. Even the mechanical cleaning unit seemed to give them extra space. That's when Hyunwoo saw the old man. Jin Park moved slowly down the corridor, his metal walking cane clicking rhythmically against the deck plating. At 80 years old, he looked like any other human retiree. Grey hair neatly combed, simple clothes, maybe visiting the station to see family or conduct some quiet business. His posture suggested old injuries, the kind that came from a hard life. But his eyes were sharp and alert. The Krillian leader noticed him too. "Hey, old meat," the alien called out, using the derogatory term his species had for humans. His voice was like grinding metal. "This is a toll zone now. Pay up or crawl back to your little human sector." Jin stopped walking. He didn't look frightened, just tired. "I'm just trying to get to the medical bay, son. My appointment's in 10 minutes. The alien's laugh was like breaking glass. "Son? You calling me son, human?" He stepped forward, towering over Jin. "Maybe you need a lesson in respect." Other beings in the corridor began backing away. A group of Zentari merchants quickly closed their stalls. Even the service drones seemed to sense trouble and moved to higher altitudes. Hyunwoo felt his hand drift toward his sidearm, but station regulations were clear about weapons discharge in civilian areas. "Please," Jin said calmly, "I don't want any trouble." "Too late for that, old man." The Krillian's massive hand shot out, connecting with Jin's chest. The force sent the elderly human flying backward. Jin's body hit the metal support beam with a sickening clang, and his walking cane went spinning across the smooth deck plating, clattering like dice. Hyunwoo watched in horror as Jin slumped against the beam. A thin line of blood appeared above the old man's left eye where his head had struck the metal. The Krillian gang erupted in laughter, their harsh voices echoing off the corridor walls. "Pathetic humans," the leader sneered, flexing his clawed fingers. "Your kind should know their place in this galaxy. Weak, soft, good for nothing but serving. Real species." His gang members nodded and made threatening gestures toward other humans in the area. A young human couple with their child quickly disappeared around a corner. An elderly human woman pressed herself against a shop window, clearly terrified. But Jin Park didn't cry out, didn't beg, didn't even look angry. Instead, he slowly pushed himself upright, using the support beam. Blood trickled down from the cut above his eye, but his expression remained perfectly calm, almost serene. There was something unsettling about that composure, though Hyunwoo couldn't put his finger on what. "Tougher than expected," one of the gang members growled. "Want me to finish the lesson, Thrak?" The leader waved him off. "Nah, let the old fool crawl away. Maybe next time he'll remember to show proper respect." The gang laughed again and began moving on, looking for other targets. As they passed other aliens, everyone carefully avoided eye contact. This was typical behavior on the Outer Rim stations. Nobody wanted to get involved in someone else's problems, especially when Krillian gangs were involved. Hyunwoo couldn't just stand there any longer. He rushed across the corridor, his boots clicking against the deck plating. "Sir, are you all right?" he asked, crouching down beside Jin. The old man looked up at him with eyes that seemed far older than 80 years. "I've had worse, son. Much worse." Hyunwoo retrieved the walking cane and helped Jin to his feet. Despite the blood and the obvious pain, Jin moved with surprising steadiness. There was something about the way he carried himself, even injured, that reminded Hyunwoo of his old drill instructors back on Earth. We should get you to the medical bay, Hyunwoo said. That's where I was headed anyway, Jin replied with a slight smile. Thank you for the help, Lieutenant. As they walked slowly down the corridor, Hyunwoo couldn't shake the feeling that he was missing something important. Jin Park seemed too calm for someone who'd just been assaulted. Too composed, like this wasn't his first time dealing with violence. Behind them, the Krillian gang continued their rampage through the station, completely unaware that they had just made the biggest mistake of their lives. The news traveled through the human quarters like wildfire through dry grass. It started in the medical bay where Dr. Hae-jin Kim was treating Jin's cut. She mentioned it to her assistant, who told the maintenance crew, who shared it with the docking supervisors. Within 30 minutes, every human on Station Omega-7 knew what had happened. Soonja Lee sat at her communication console in the station's central hub, her fingers dancing across the holographic interface. As the primary communication officer, for the human diplomatic mission, she'd heard dozens of stories about conflicts between species, but this one felt different. This one made her angry. She opened a secure channel to the UES Thunder, the massive human warship currently docked at Bay 7 for routine maintenance and resupply. The ship's communication array picked up her signal immediately. Thunder Command. This is Station Omega-7. Priority message for Captain Dongmin Park. Copy that, Omega-7, patching you through now. Captain Dongmin Park was in his quarters reviewing supply manifests when the call came through. A veteran of 12 years in the human space navy, he'd commanded the Thunder through 3 major conflicts and countless smaller skirmishes. His crew respected him not just for his tactical brilliance, but for his unwavering loyalty to his people. Captain here. What's the situation, Soonja? Sir, we've had an incident. One of our civilians was assaulted by a Krillian gang. Physical assault, sir. The victim is an elderly gentleman named Jin Park. The tablet in Dongmin's hands clattered to the floor. Jin Park? He whispered, his voice barely audible over the comm. The Jin Park? Yes, sir. I believe so. The gentleman is about 80 years old, former military by the look of him. Dongmin's mind raced back 20 years to a classified military training facility on Europa. He could still remember the legend who'd trained him and countless other SEALs. The man who'd taught them that true strength came not from size or aggression, but from precision, planning, and the absolute refusal to abandon your own people. Down in the Thunder's armory, Sergeant Min-ho Choi was performing routine maintenance on his pulse rifle when he heard the captain's voice echo through the ship's intercom system. All senior staff to the bridge, emergency assembly. Now. Min-ho had served under Captain Park for 8 years. He'd never heard that tone before. Cold, controlled, but with something dangerous underneath. Like the calm before a solar storm, he made his way to the bridge along with the other senior officers. Lieutenant Tae-young Kim from Navigation, Chief Engineer Yeon-soo Park, Intelligence Officer Hae-won Lee. All of them had seen combat, all of them had faced impossible odds and emerged victorious. But when Captain Park turned to face them, Min-ho saw something in his commander's eyes that he'd never seen before, a fury so controlled it was almost frightening. Sergeant Choi, the captain said quietly, "You know that name, don't you?" Jin Park? Min-ho's breath caught in his throat. The Kepler station hero? The man who held off the entire Vorthan assault fleet with just a damaged frigate and a skeleton crew. Every SEAL knows that name, Dongmin replied grimly. He's the one who trained half of us, the man who wrote the book on deep space combat tactics, the soldier who single-handedly saved 3 colonies from annihilation. The bridge fell silent. Through the massive viewport, they could see Station Omega-7 rotating slowly against the backdrop of distant stars. Somewhere on that station, their greatest hero had been attacked like a common victim. "What are your orders, Captain?" asked Lieutenant Kim. Dongmin activated the ship's internal communication system. His voice rang out through every corridor, every room, every corner of the Thunder. "Attention all hands. This is your captain speaking. Assemble all SEAL teams. In Conference Room Alpha, full combat kit, this is not a drill." Within minutes, the ship's elite SEAL team had assembled. 8 of humanity's deadliest warriors, each a veteran of countless battles across the galaxy. They wore their black combat suits, their faces painted with the traditional war markings, that had struck fear into alien enemies for decades. Corporal Ji Hye Nam, their stealth specialist, checked her optical camouflage system. Sergeant Woo Jin, Kim loaded his sniper rifle with precision rounds. Explosives expert Young Ho Park ran diagnostics on his demolition charges. Each warrior was a master of their craft, trained to perfection by the man who now lay injured on the station. But none of them had ever seen their captain this focused, this quietly furious. Captain Park stood before them like a statue carved from granite, his jaw set, his eyes burning with controlled rage. "Gentlemen," he said softly, "1 hour ago a Krillian gang assaulted our instructor, the man who trained us, the man who taught us what it means to be human warriors in a hostile galaxy." The room was so quiet, you could hear the ship's life support. "Systems humming in the walls? They think humans are weak," the captain continued. "They think we're soft targets, easy prey for any alien with more muscle than brain. They're about to learn how wrong they are." Meanwhile, 3 levels down on Station Omega 7, the Krillian gang continued their rampage through the commercial district. They'd stolen credits from a Zelkan merchant, intimidated a family of Altarian tourists, and were now threatening the owner of a small electronics shop. Their leader, Thrak, was enjoying himself immensely. Humans made such satisfying victims. They rarely fought back, and when they did, they were laughably weak compared to Krillian strength. He'd been running similar operations on a dozen stations across this sector, and the profits were excellent. "Easy money," he growled to his gang members. "These humans are too scared to fight, too weak to matter. We own this station now." He had no idea that 8 of humanity's deadliest predators were already suiting up for war. The Thunder's tactical planning room hummed with activity as holographic displays flickered to life around the conference table. Captain Dongmin Park stood at the center, his fingers dancing across the control interface, as 3-dimensional blueprints of Station Omega 7 materialized in the air before them. "All right, people," he said quietly. "We do this right. No mistakes, no witnesses, and absolutely no collateral damage." Corporal Ji Nam adjusted her stealth suit one final time before slipping into the station's maintenance shaft. The suit was humanity's latest breakthrough in optical camouflage technology, a second skin of adaptive fibers that bent light around her body, making her virtually invisible to both organic eyes and electronic sensors. She crawled through the narrow ventilation tunnel, her movement silent as a shadow. The shaft ran directly above Cargo Bay 12, where intelligence reports suggested the Krillian gang conducted their most serious business. Through the metal grating, she could see everything. 7 Krillians stood around crates of illegal weapons. Plasma rifles, ion cannons, even what looked like military-grade explosives. Their leader, Thrak, was negotiating with a nervous-looking Vorthan dealer who kept glancing at the exit. 7 targets confirmed, Ji-Hai whispered into her throat mic, the sound barely audible even to herself. Heavy weapons cache in the northeast corner. Looks like enough firepower to level half the station. She activated her suit's recording system, capturing video evidence of the illegal arms deal. The footage would be crucial later, not just for their operation, but for station security to clean up the mess afterward. Back in the Thunder's planning room, the SEALs studied every detail of the station's layout. Sergeant Woo Jin Kim manipulated the holographic display, highlighting key locations with his fingertips. Corridors, maintenance shafts, emergency exits, security checkpoints, every possible route was mapped and analyzed. "According to my contacts in station security," Woo Jin reported, "this gang has been operating here for 6 months. They've been extorting the Zelkan merchants in Sector 7, running protection rackets in the lower levels, and apparently dealing in black market weapons." Tech specialist Yoonji Song sat at her mobile command center, 6 holographic screens floating around her like digital wings. Her fingers moved across virtual keyboards faster than most people could follow. Within minutes, she'd infiltrated Station Omega 7's security network completely. "I'm in," she announced. "Full access to their surveillance system, emergency protocols, and environmental controls. I can map every escape route they might use." The security footage played out across her screens, weeks of recorded evidence showing the Krillian gang's crimes, Assault, theft, intimidation, weapons trafficking, everything they needed to justify what was about to happen. "Look at this," Yunji said, pulling up a particular video file. "They've been systematically targeting human civilians. This isn't random violence, it's organized harassment." Captain Dongmin watched the footage with growing anger. The gang had been picking on humans specifically, targeting the elderly, families with children, anyone who looked vulnerable. They'd turned terror into a business model. Lieutenant Tae-Young Kim spread physical blueprints across the table, alongside the holographic displays. Station Omega-7 has 12 docking bays, 47 levels, and over 300 individual compartments. But the gang operates primarily in 3 locations. He pointed to specific areas on the display. Cargo Bay 12 for their weapons deals, the lower cantina in Sector 9 for money laundering, and they've been using abandoned quarters in Section C7 as their base of operations. Demolitions expert Young Ho Park studied the structural layout with a professional eye. "If we need to cut off their escape routes, I can disable the main lifts in under 30 seconds. Emergency bulkheads can seal entire sections on command." "No," Captain Dongmin said firmly. "No collateral damage. This station has innocent civilians, humans and aliens alike. We do this surgically." Corporal Ji-Hai's voice crackled through the comm system again. "Captain, you need to see this. They're planning something big." Through her suit's camera feed, the team watched as Thrak received a message on his personal communicator. The massive Krillion's face twisted into what might have been a smile on his reptilian features. "The old human died from his injuries," Thrak announced to his gang. "Natural causes," the medical report says. "Heart failure." The lie sent ice through every SEAL's veins. They knew Jin Park was alive and recovering, but the gang was planning to use his supposed death as cover for escalating their operations. "Time to send a message to all the soft skins on this station," Thrak continued. "Tonight we take over the human quarter completely. Anyone who resists gets the same treatment as the old man." Captain Dongmin's jaw tightened. "Change of plans, people. We move tonight." Intelligence Officer Haewon Lee pulled up psychological profiles of each gang member. Krillians are pack hunters by nature. They rely on intimidation and brute force, but they're not strategic thinkers. Once we separate them from their leader, the others will panic. "Their weakness is overconfidence," added Sergeant Min-Ho Choi. "They've been operating unopposed for months. They won't expect organized resistance." Yoonji's fingers flew across her interfaces as she began planning the electronic warfare component. "I can disable their communications, lock down their escape routes, and feed false information to their security contacts. They'll be blind and isolated before they know what hit them." The holographic display updated in real time as each team member added their expertise to the plan. Infiltration routes marked in blue, weapons caches highlighted in red. Civilian areas marked as no-go zones in green. "Remember," Captain Dongmin said as the planning session concluded, "we're not just getting justice for Jin Park. We're sending a message to every criminal organization in this sector. Humans protect their own, and when you hurt one of us, you answer to all of us." The 8 SEALs stood around the tactical display, their faces grim with determination. They'd planned operations against alien battle fleets, infiltrated enemy strongholds across a dozen worlds, and emerged victorious from impossible odds. But this felt different. This was personal. "One more thing," the captain added quietly. "When this is over, I want every civilian on this station to sleep safely in their beds. We're the good guys, people. Let's make sure we act like it." As the team dispersed to prepare their equipment, none of them noticed the small maintenance drone hovering outside the planning room's viewport. Its optical sensors recorded everything, transmitting the data to a receiver somewhere deep in the station's lower levels. The hunt was about to begin. The operation began at exactly 300 station time, when most of the galaxy slept and the corridors of Omega-7 lay in artificial twilight. The SEALs moved like whispers through the darkened passages, their black combat suits blending perfectly with the shadows between the overhead lighting strips. Corporal Ji-Hai Nam dropped silently from a ventilation shaft into the station's communication center. Her stealth suit rippled like liquid mercury as she approached the main relay station. The night shift technician, a sleepy Altarian with blue skin, never even noticed her presence as she worked. Her fingers danced across the control panel with surgical precision. Within seconds, she'd isolated the communication frequencies used by the Krillian gang. A few more keystrokes and their entire network went dead. No calls for backup, no warnings to accomplices, no contact with off-station allies. Comms are dark, she whispered into her throat mic. They're flying blind now. 2 levels below, demolitions expert Young-Ho Park and sniper Woo-Jin Kim approached Cargo Bay 12 through separate maintenance corridors. The weapons cache that Ji-Hai had discovered earlier was their primary target. Enough illegal firepower to turn a simple arrest into a devastating battle. Young-Ho peered through his night vision scope at the 2 Krillian guards standing outside the cargo bay. They looked bored, their massive frames leaning against the bulkhead as they shared some kind of alien alcohol that glowed faintly green in the darkness. 2 sentries at the main entrance, he reported quietly. Standard patrol pattern every 3 minutes. Wu Jin was positioned in an access shaft 40 meters away, his sniper rifle trained on both targets. I have clean shots on both, non-lethal rounds loaded. Take them, came Captain Dongmin's voice through their earpieces. The sniper rifle made barely a whisper as it fired. 2 tranquilizer darts found their marks simultaneously, and the Krillian guards collapsed within seconds. Their massive bodies hit the deck with soft thuds that echoed briefly through the empty corridor. Young-Ho emerged from his hiding spot and quickly dragged the unconscious aliens out of sight. Then he turned his attention to the cargo bay's security door. His electronic lockpick made quick work of the alien security system, and the door slid open with a soft hiss. Inside, crates of weapons were stacked floor to ceiling. Plasma rifles, ion cannons, explosive charges, even what looked like a military-grade particle beam weapon that could punch through starship armor. Enough firepower to outfit a small army. Weapons cache secured, Young-Ho reported as he began, placing small charges on each crate. Not enough to destroy them, just enough to disable the weapons permanently if anyone tried to use them. Meanwhile, in the station's lower levels, the rest of the team was moving through the shadows like digital ghosts. Intelligence Officer Haewon Lee had provided them with detailed information about each gang member's location, habits, and weaknesses. Sergeant Minho Choi found his target in the lower cantina, a Krillian enforcer named Gorak, who'd been collecting protection money from terrified merchants. The alien was drunk on Vorthan whiskey, his reflexes dulled by alcohol and overconfidence. Minho dropped from a ceiling vent directly behind his target. Before Gorak could even turn around, the SEAL had applied a sleeper hold that cut off blood flow to the alien's brain. The massive Krillian struggled for exactly 7 seconds before going limp. Target 2 down, Minho whispered as he zip-tied the unconscious alien's hands and feet. Across the station, similar scenes played out with mechanical precision. Each SEAL had been assigned specific targets based on their individual skills and the tactical situation. No wasted movement, no unnecessary risks, no room for error. Lieutenant Tae-Young Kim cornered another gang member in the station's recycling center. The Krillian was trying to dispose of evidence, data chips containing records of their illegal activities. But Tae-Young's optical camouflage suit made him effectively invisible in the dim lighting. "Looking for something?" Tae-Young asked, materializing out of thin air behind the startled alien. The Krillian spun around, claws extended, but found only empty air. Tae-Young had already moved, striking from a completely different angle. A precisely applied nerve strike dropped the criminal instantly, but the real hunt was taking place in the station's central hub, where Thrak, the gang's leader, had retreated. When his communications went dead, the massive Krillian stood nearly 9 feet tall, his scarred hide gleaming under the harsh overhead lights. He held a military-grade plasma rifle, stolen most likely, and his reptilian eyes darted nervously around the circular chamber. "Come out!" he roared, his voice echoing off the metal walls. "Face me like warriors, not cowards hiding in shadows." Captain Dongmin Park stepped into the light at the far end of the hub. He wore no camouflage, carried no heavy weapons, just his standard sidearm and the cold fury of a professional soldier who'd seen his mentor attacked. "You want to face a warrior?" Dongmin said quietly. "Here I am." Thrak's laugh was like grinding metal. One soft human against me? You're even more pathetic than the old man. The old man has a name, Dongmin replied. Jin Park, the man you assaulted, the man who's forgotten more about warfare than you'll ever learn. Thrak raised his plasma rifle, but before he could fire, the lights went out. Emergency lighting kicked in a second later, bathing the hub in red-tinted darkness. But Thrak was no longer facing one human. Shadows moved around him from all directions, shapes that seemed to flow like liquid through the dim light. He fired blindly, his plasma bolts lighting up the chamber with brilliant flashes. But the humans were ghosts, striking from impossible angles. A tranquilizer dart hit his neck, another struck his shoulder. A third found its mark in his thigh. Impossible, he gasped as his vision began to blur. You're just humans, weak, soft. Captain Dongmin stepped back into the light as Thrak collapsed to his knees. We are human, he said quietly. That's exactly why you never stood a chance. The massive Krillian tried to speak, but the tranquilizers were already taking effect. His plasma rifle clattered to the deck as his arms went numb. You see, Dongmin continued, humans don't fight fair. We don't rely on size or strength or intimidation. We plan, we coordinate, we adapt, and most importantly, we never abandon. Haron. One by one, Thrak's gang members were neutralized across the station. Each capture was surgical, professional, leaving no room for error or escape. Within 2 hours, the entire criminal organization had been wrapped up and delivered to station security. When the security forces arrived, they found the complete operation gift-wrapped for them, unconscious criminals secured with military-grade restraints, weapons caches disabled and catalogued, digital evidence of months of illegal activity compiled and organized. And in the station's medical bay, an old man named Jin Park slept peacefully, unaware that 8 of humanity's finest warriors had just reminded the galaxy why humans were not to be underestimated. The detention block of Station Omega-7 hummed with the constant sound of recycled air and electronic monitoring systems. In cell block C7, Thrak sat on the narrow metal bench that served as both seat and bed, his massive frame hunched over in defeat. The proud Krillian warrior who had terrorized merchants and intimidated civilians now looked like a broken creature. His scales, once gleaming with arrogance, had dulled to a sickly grey. The tranquilizer chemicals were finally wearing off, but the shame of his capture burned worse than any physical pain. He'd been taken down by humans, soft, weak humans, who should have been easy prey. The security footage played endlessly in his mind. 8 shadows moving through darkness like digital phantoms, weapons that fired without sound, warriors who struck from impossible angles and vanished before he could even see them. It wasn't warfare as he understood it. It was something far more terrifying. Station security had been thorough in their processing, every illegal weapon confiscated, every stolen credit recovered, digital evidence of months of criminal activity compiled into an airtight case. The Galactic Court would have no trouble convicting him and his entire gang, but what haunted Thrak most was the realization that he'd never even seen it coming. The humans had dismantled his entire operation in less than 3 hours, and he'd been powerless to stop them. The detention cell's energy barrier flickered as someone approached from the corridor outside. Thrak expected another interrogator, maybe the stern Altarian prosecutor who'd been building the case against him, or perhaps one of the station security officers with more questions about his criminal network. Instead, the barrier deactivated. With a soft chime, and Jin Park walked slowly into the cell. The elderly human moved carefully, his metal walking cane clicking against the deck plating with each step. The cut above his eye had healed, leaving only a small bandage as evidence of their encounter. He wore simple civilian clothes, a dark sweater and comfortable pants that made him look like any other retiree visiting the station. But Thrak's reptilian eyes widened in terror as he recognized the man he'd assaulted just days earlier. "You," Thrak whispered, pressing himself against the far wall of the cell as if trying to disappear into the metal bulkhead. Jin nodded politely and settled himself on the opposite bench, placing his walking cane across his knees. Despite being in a detention cell with a criminal who'd attacked him, he showed no fear, no anger, No desire for revenge, just calm curiosity. "I wanted to speak with you before they transfer you to Galactic Court tomorrow," Jin said quietly, his voice carrying the weight of age and experience. "I hope you don't mind the visit." Thrak's massive frame trembled as he stared at the old man. "Your warriors," he stammered, his voice cracking like broken glass. "They're monsters, demons. No living beings could move like that, strike like that, hunt like that." Jin shook his head slowly. "No, son. They're simply very good at their job." The elderly human's calm demeanor was more unsettling than any threat could have been. Thrak had expected anger, demands for apology, maybe even gloating over his capture. Instead, Jin Park sat peacefully, like a grandfather visiting with a troubled youth. "You attacked an old man because you thought humans were weak," Jin continued, his weathered hands resting calmly on his cane. "Soft targets, easy prey. But what you didn't understand is that we protect our own, and we do it with precision that would make a surgeon jealous." Thrak slumped forward, his massive head in his clawed hands. "I don't understand. Your species has no natural weapons, no armored hide, no enhanced strength or speed." "How?" "Intelligence," Jin replied simply. "Patience. The ability to work as a perfect team. You see, Thrak-Krillians fight with muscle and intimidation. Vorthans rely on their technology. Altarians use their psychic abilities. But humans, we adapt, we learn, we plan. And when someone threatens our family, we become the most dangerous predators in the galaxy." The old man stood slowly, using his cane for support. Through the cell's small viewport, they could see the docking bay where the UES Thunder was preparing to depart. The massive human warship's engines glowed like blue stars against the darkness of space. "Those 8 warriors who captured you and your gang," Jin said, watching the ship. "I trained them 20 years ago, taught them everything I know about warfare, tactics, and the importance of protecting innocent people. They're the best of humanity's best, and they'll spend their lives making sure criminals like you can't hurt anyone else." Thrak looked up at the viewport, seeing the Thunder's weapon arrays and defensive systems. For the first time, he began to understand the true scope of what he'd stumbled into. This wasn't just about one old man or 8 soldiers. This was about an entire species that had turned warfare into an art form. Suddenly, the proud Krillian warrior fell to his knees, his massive frame shaking with something that might have been fear or respect or both. "Please," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "Mercy. I beg for mercy." Jin Park looked down at the broken alien with something that might have been pity. He tapped his walking cane once against the deck plating, the sound echoing in the small cell like a judge's gavel. "You'll receive a fair trial," he said quietly. "Legal representation, due process under galactic law, a chance to reform and make amends for your crimes. That's more mercy than you showed the merchants you terrorized, the families you threatened, or the old man you assaulted." Jin moved toward the cell door, then paused and looked back at Thrak one final time. "Remember this, son. Humanity's greatest strength isn't our weapons or our tactics or even our warriors. It's knowing when to use them and, more importantly, when to show restraint. We could have killed you and your gang without breaking a sweat. Instead, we chose justice over vengeance." As the elderly human walked slowly out of the detention cell, his cane clicking rhythmically against the deck, Thrak remained on his knees, staring at the spot where Jin had stood. For the first time in his violent life, the Krillian warrior understood that humanity's quiet demeanor, their peaceful negotiations, their preference for diplomacy over conflict, none of it was weakness, it was choice. The choice of apex predators who were secure enough in their strength to show mercy to those who couldn't fight back. In the corridor outside, Jin Park made his way slowly toward the exit, passing other detention cells filled with the remnants of the criminal gang. Each alien prisoner watched him with a mixture of fear and grudging respect. Word of what had happened was already spreading through the galactic underworld. Humanity was not to be underestimated. As Jin reached the main corridor, he could see through the station's massive viewport as the UES Thunder prepared for departure. The 8 SEALs who had captured the gang were already back aboard, ready for their next mission, their next chance to protect innocent people from those who would harm them. The old veteran smiled slightly and continued his slow walk home, knowing that somewhere in the galaxy, His former students were carrying on the tradition he taught them decades ago. Protect the innocent, serve justice, and never, ever abandon your own. The end.